This year at Koyfin, we've added a lot of new features and functionality to the platform, so we figured it was time to create a brand new 2023 Koyfin demo to show you what we've done.
The goal of this video is to give you a high-level overview of the entire platform and what it can do. For deeper insights into each of the features that we're going to be showing you today, I recommend checking out the Koyfin YouTube library. We have a bunch of specific videos there that focus on different components of the platform, such as our charting masterclass, how to analyze Wall Street consensus estimates, and how to maximize the value of the Koyfin screener. Today, we're going to be giving you a wide overview of the platform. So the first thing you're going to see when you jump into Koyfin is our landing page called Today's Markets. It breaks out currencies, global markets, commodities, and other themes. And every time that you click one of these checkboxes, it's going to interact with the chart here in the middle. We're not live right now in terms of US market hours, but when we are, these will be ticking away in real time. You can see the currencies are doing so right now. Over here on the right-hand side, you can add watch list views for companies that you're tracking. You can also add news items in there as well, which will update during the day. And you also have the market movers tab here as well, which when you set it to a particular index or a watch list, will show you the movers in that basket of companies during the day. The market news tab here gives you aggregated news across global markets, corporate events, industries, macro specific, global economy, analyst changes, you name it. And you can also build a custom market news screen here as well. You can give that a name. You can choose whether you want to see top news or headlines only. You can filter between a bunch of different topic focuses. And you can also change the origin as well for regions and specific countries. And when you've created your news feed, you can then create new and it will live here on the news feed. The Market Movers tab is a great feature which incorporates a scatter chart as well as the gainers and losers of a particular basket of companies that you're looking at, and this will take away live during the day. We also have pre-market and post-market options here as well with a sector filter. And up here on the left-hand side, this is where you're going to select which basket of companies you're looking at. We give you the major indices, so the Russell, the Nasdaq, the S&P. You can also pick an ETF here as well, and it will pull out the constituents of that ETF and give you a similar view. Or you can also build a watch list and then pull those into this tool as well. So the watch list is something which is incredibly powerful, and I say that it has the Pareto principle on Koyfin because taking the time to build these watch lists really does power the rest of the platform. And we're going to show you what I mean by that all throughout this video. So you can do multiple things in here. You can track a portfolio if you want. So here's an example with a bunch of different securities, their weightings, a nice flag here representing which country they're from, earnings date, and then a bunch of fundamental data here. You can also track macroeconomic things as well. So I've got the headline inflation rate for a bunch of countries here. I've got the latest reading, the last reading, and then a custom label indicating whether that's higher, lower, or the same, and a little chart here. I've also broken out month over month inflation, core inflation along the same basket of countries as well. Here is another example, a time series of total returns going back, decades. I've got ETFs that track particular themes here, and down here I've got US sectors as well. You can also use this to build watch lists, portfolios, and track other macro related instruments, as well as forward estimates data. So here's a basket of companies. Here is the 2023 revenue estimate. Here's EBIT and GAAP EPS and the year-over-year growth rate. If you want to customize a brand new watch list, the thing to do is go up here to columns, where we give you a huge library of hundreds of data points across price data, fundamental data, specific security information. We have asset-specific factors in here as well. All the fundamental data that you can think of with growth rates, CAGRs, and margins. We also have analyst estimates as well, both numerical and percentage. We have estimates revisions, we have price targets, ratings, and we also have percentile ranks as well, which we'll cover in just a moment. Anytime that you want to pick something, you click it and you choose the criteria, and it moves over here onto the right-hand side and it'll be added to the watch list. And if you want to remove it, you can go ahead and just delete it. Some other things to be aware of, we have summary tabs here. So you can add a bunch of percentiles, you can add medians and minimums, averages, maximums, and all of that will calculate all the data based on what's in your watch list and populate it down here. You can also group watch lists by their asset type, so equity, ETF. You can group them by category, country, sector, anything that takes your fancy, and then you can go ahead and save that, and it will save that view for you. You can also change the currency up here on the right-hand side as well as when you have your view, you save it and you can see them all listed here and you can flick between them. My favorite aspect personally of the watch list feature is the newsfeed up here. So if this is the basket of companies you're interested in observing, I go ahead and hit news. I now have a dedicated newsfeed tailored to me based on news, press releases, filings, and transcripts for those securities. I can go ahead and read those inside of Koyfin. And I typically, on a personal level, don't have news because I'm not a heavy newsreader, but if you wanted to, you could include that. And we give you a bunch of different categories that you can filter down by, whether it's market related, analyst changes, market summaries. You can toggle those on and off. We also have a bunch of RSS news feeds, and you can change which filings come through the feed as well. This is super useful and something that I typically leave open during the day. The market screener tool in Koyfin is extremely powerful. We have access to over 98,000 securities across the world, and it really is a global stock screener. So if I go ahead here and filter the trading region to all, this should have about 98,000 securities in it. The first thing you want to do here is create your investment universe. So by that, I mean you can filter down by country, you can add descriptions, you can pull out ETF constituents from an ETF, you can focus on particular exchanges, industries, or sectors. You can add all the sectors and then exclude the ones that you don't want to see in there. And when you've established your investment universe, we're going to give you that same data set that we showed you in the watch list, hundreds of items that you can choose from. We'll give you a range that you can choose. And when you're happy with your output, you give it a name and you save it. And when you've saved your screener, you can go ahead and save that as a watch list. It'll go over to your watch list tab and you can drag that all over the Koyfin platform. And we'll show you some examples of what I mean by that in just a second. But before we go, we also have a global ETF screener there as well. So if I click all the trading countries we have, there should be slightly over 25,000 ETFs that you can pick from. And the universe criteria is going to be asset specific to ETFs, as well as the filter criteria is going to be asset specific as well. Mutual funds, we only have US mutual funds right now, but we're in the process of adding Canadian mutual fund data, and then eventually we'd like to have global too. Similar to the ETF, we have mutual fund specific universe criteria, and we also have filter criteria as well, specific to mutual funds. Just to give you some examples of what I mean when I'm talking about using watch lists throughout the platform, we're going to go down here into the analytics tab, and we're going to jump into our earnings calendar. So you can very quickly create earnings calendars in Koyfin at the click of a button. Right now, you'll see that we have this filtered to the S&P. You can also similarly pull in ETFs and we'll create a calendar based on the constituents. Or if you have created a watch list, you can click on one of those and we'll generate an earnings calendar for that watch list as well. Key things to note here. Up here is the date range. You can go plus minus 90 days or have it a little bit closer by a week. Here we break out the date, but you can group those by sector as well if you want. I would recommend then filtering by the date as well so you can get some recency there. You can change the currency up here on the right-hand side as well. And you can also change the granularity with which we show you the forward estimates data. So if I scroll here on the right, we're showing you what the expected revenue for Netflix is here, the high, the low, the average. If I go to settings and then remove the detailed estimate data, we'll just show you the average instead. And then when they do report, we'll show you the actual as well as the surprise. So if I go trailing 90 days, we actually populate that information after they've reported. The lots of chart feature is another one that you can pull in watch list to. So I have this set up for a portfolio view. If I wanted to go to the XLE Energy ETF here, for example, I can quickly see what they're all doing year to date in terms of performance. Here's the high, here's the low. You can also change the chart template. Typically, we give you a default where you can have normalized performance or you can have a historical price graph. I'm going to show you some chart templates later, but I've created this one in my own time, and that's typically how I like to see the lots of charts features shown. The market scatter chart is another great tool that you can utilize watch this in. Essentially, what it allows you to do is express the relationship between any two variables on an X and Y basis. And we give you a nice table down here on the right-hand side as well, which you can share or download. Up here is where you'll change the X and Y axis, again, utilizing that same basket of data that we give you all throughout the platform. Currently, I've got it set to forward earnings by total return year to date, and I've got this set up for the S&P 500. But again, you can pull out the constituents of an ETF, or you can also use your own watch list as well. And lastly, just while we're here, we also have economic calendars too. So every important macro event that's going on over the next week, we will break that down for you. We'll show you the previous figure, the consensus, as well as the actual. And each of these widgets is interactive. So you can see that a few days ago, mortgage applications, we can click on that. We can see a chart here. And if we want to, we can open this up into the Koyfin graphing tool. Up on the right-hand side, we currently have it filtered for United States, but if I wanted to have a global macro calendar, I could highlight show all countries. And here I have every country that we have on Koyfin, and you can break down the earnings calendar. So let's say you're an analyst and you want to start studying individual stocks. So the way that you would do that, there's a bunch of sections down here, but the most important one is this filter here. So currently I have it set up to meta. Anything that you type in here, Koyfin is going to assume that you want to see Koyfin through the lens of that security. If it's appropriate, you can also search for securities up here in the search ticker function as well. But right now I have it filtered for Apple. So if I go to snapshots, it's going to show me snapshots of Apple. If I go to financial analysis, it's going to be related to Apple. If you're not familiar with a company or you just want some high level information, snapshots is the perfect place to go first. We're going to give you some high level overview of the company of a little news feed down here, a performance chart that you can change and add your own templates to. We give you some key data, some performance returns, valuation, capital structure, and some forward estimates. Go one down into the description and we explain a little bit about what the company does, as well as give you some more data. Percentile ranks, which I showed you earlier, is a great feature unique to Koyfin. Essentially what it does is expresses where a multiple or a metric is in relation to its own history, the sector that it trades in, and the country that it trades in. You can also change these tabs to show global comparisons, and you can reduce the time period from 20 to 10 years. But let's translate this into English. So we're filtered on Apple. The forward earnings multiple right now is currently 27. Relative to Apple's 20-year history, it's in the 71st percentile, so it's reasonably high. Relative to the sector that it trades in the US, it's in the 59th percentile, and relative to the country, it's in the 81st. So we break this out for you across valuation multiples, yields, margins, leverage levels, and the Altman Z-score there as well. And you can change the period to 10 years, and we can see that relative to its 10-year history, it's in a slightly higher percentile. Some things that you can quickly ascertain from this, apart from just valuation. So we can see Apple's forward earnings is pretty high relative to its history. But if we go down here and look at gross profit margins have never been higher. So while it might be interesting to establish, hey, Apple's pretty expensive here, the causation for that might be that its margins are higher. It's now a subscription business. It maybe commands a higher multiple. That's not for me to say. That's for you to understand as the investor. And just to give you some perspective, if I go ahead and type in PayPal here, PayPal is a company that's currently trading at the rock bottom end of its historic norms. All of these valuation multiples essentially are in the bottom percentile. In a sense, it's never traded as cheaply. The qualitative aspect to that is maybe it deserves to be trading there because competition is higher. Everybody's supposedly eating their margin. Again, not for me to decide, that's for you to ascertain. The dividend snapshot is going to give you a high-level overview of the dividend payments over time, if the company pays one, with the yield and payments. And we break out in a more granular fashion down here, the quarterly dividend payments, as well as the shareholder yield, the growth, and the frequency. Ownership data is interesting. I find this more interesting for small caps personally, because you can see which C-suite executives have a big position in the company. For Apple, it's going to be filled with Vanguard, BlackRock, Berkshire Hathaway. But if we look along these columns here, we can see that Berkshire Hathaway owns about $177 billion in Apple. It's about 5.8% of Apple's market cap, and it's about 51% of Berkshire Hathaway's holdings. We also break out ETF exposure as well, which ETFs own Apple, in what size. For pro users, we also break out mutual fund exposure. And my favorite tab on the snapshots column is earnings history. This is a nice way to ascertain how consistently companies beat their expectations. So on this chart up here, we have the 5-year time for sales. This is every quarter that Apple's reported. This is what they were expected to do from the market. This is what they actually reported. And then we break out the surprise or the miss in a percentage and a numerical basis. And you can see the green indicates a beat and the red indicates a miss. And we also break that down a little granularly down here, where we show you the estimates on a high, low, and average basis, the actual reported number, the sales surprise or miss, the surprise in a percentage term. This is probably a rounding issue here, and then the trailing basis. And you can toggle this between EBITDA, EBIT, EPS, and GAAP. If you want to get a little bit more in the weeds of a company and you already understand what they do, you would do that in two ways. You might just want to see the fundamental data, or you might want to go straight into the filings. So in terms of fundamental data, we have that globally. We pull that in for every company. You'll be able to get nice itemized summaries of balance sheet items, income statement, cash flow, multiples, enterprise values, profitability, solvency ratios. We have all that kind of stuff here. My favorite aspect of financial analysis is that you can build your own custom templates. So here's one I've created called Master View. It breaks down the income statement and the cash flow statement components in a slightly more granular fashion. It's a high-level summary that I'd want to see for flicking through a bunch of companies, just a quick glance. And it breaks down the margins and the growth rates slightly better. And we also have one here as well that I created, which just breaks down forward and trailing multiples, as well as the shareholder yield. You can copy these things to clipboard and then add them to Excel also. However, if you want to go straight to source and you want to read the filings, we do have that. For US companies, we pull in all the filings from SEC. For international companies, we don't have the filings yet, but we eventually want to, and we do have all the fundamental data for those international companies as well. But for US companies, I could go here, click the Apple 10Q interim report. That would populate in here. I can read it. I can get transported to Edgar if I wanted to, which is great. We also pull in all the transcripts for companies, not just US ones. Apple doesn't do too many presentations outside of quarterly earnings calls, but when they do, we pull those in. So a few weeks ago, they did a climate week. We pull that in and you can read that. If you go to the quarterly earnings call here as well, you can type in specific search terms such as China, and it will take me to those aspects in the call. We also have dedicated feeds for press releases too, which again, you can read inside of the platform, as well as a tailored news feed. So when you've understood what's going on a trailing basis, you might be interested in what's going to happen going forward. So we have analyst estimates data here that you can break out on an annual or quarterly basis in the analyst estimates tab, just under snapshots. So here we can see that Apple is expected to do about 383 billion in sales next year, which is going to be a slight dip from last year, but then growth is going to apparently resume over the next 3 years. We'll break out sales. We'll break out balance sheet items, cash flow statement items, per share basis, margins, everything that you can think of, we have it in here. You can download these data sets. You can change the settings to show millions instead of billions. You can change the way that they're ordered from left to right. You can add additional information as well, so showing the averages and means, as well as the number of covering analysts. And you can also change the time period here up on the right-hand side. All the price target data, the ratings data, how that changes over time, we have that as well. And we'll also give you this nice chart showing you the current share price, the average share price, the high and the low, as well as the difference between the average share price and the current share price over time. All of these charts here, if they have this little icon up in the top right-hand corner, you can click that and it'll pull it out into the charting tool in Koyfin so you can play with it yourself. The estimates overview tab is a cleaner version, gives you a high-level summary. We break out the next quarter, what's expected of Apple. And then here on a kind of X and Y basis, again, you can see the quarterly and the annual reporting periods and what's expected of Apple there across sales, EBIT, EPS, and EBITDA. Down here on the bottom, we have this historical rolling next 12-month estimate versus the stock price. And typically when these two things move in unison, it means there's a good correlation between the two. When they start to diverge, that can sometimes mean that something external to the business is impacting the share price, but it's not yet reflected in the metric. And down here on the bottom, we have estimates trends. So this shows how estimates for certain fundamental data points changes over time. You can toggle this between years and quarters. And a more interesting prospect to look at in this case is probably NVIDIA, which has had some pretty dramatic upgrades to its revenue guidance over the last few quarters, and that's now being reflected in the forward estimates. So we can see up until summer of this year, the forward estimates were pretty stable. And then in a two-step change, 1 quarter by 1 quarter, the forward estimates revenue for 2027, for example, has more than doubled. So we have a few more points to show you just before we finish this video. We've got the charting tool where people spend a lot of their time. We have advanced search, and we also have market dashboards, and then our latest feature, model portfolios. So jumping into charting for just a second, we have 3 different types of charts in Koyfin. Number 1 is performance chart. This is very simple. It breaks out total returns and the CAGRs over your given time period, and you can add in securities here on the left-hand side and change the formatting of the table here in the settings. So right now I've got it set up to show a bunch of commodities on a 5-year basis. And for some reason, NVIDIA is in there as well. Probably wouldn't want to include that. The intraday chart, we're not currently intraday while I'm recording this video, but when you are, it will update live for US securities, and you can toggle the time range between 1 to 10 days. Historical graph is the bulk of the charting tool, and it's really where a lot of people spend their time. You can do technical charting in here, fundamental charting as well, and you can build templates to use all throughout the Koyfin platform. So here right now, I've got NVIDIA set up. I've got historical chart line. I've got the 50-day moving average. I can change all of these things to show candles if I want. I can change the colors of those candles. I can add volume overlays on a share or notional basis and change the colors of those as well. I can add statistical bands like deviations and means. Right now, I've got highs and lows set up. But this allows you to build things in a pretty easy fashion. So if I'm on NVIDIA, I'll type in revenues. I want to see what revenues are on a trailing basis. I can pull that back a little bit, change this chart to linear. I can turn this into a bar chart if I want, change the color to red. I can transform the data to be year-over-year growth. If I change that back to a line chart there, for example, I can now add another security in here, Meta, and it will just take the same data series. So we've got Meta, NVIDIA on a total revenue year-over-year basis. I'm going to group the axis because we're showing the same thing, and we can see how that's changed over time. I can also add other securities in here if I want to, or I could add macroeconomic factors in here as well, like year-over-year inflation. If you want more of a granular insight into how powerful this charting tool is and what you can do with it, I'm going to drop the charting masterclass that we recorded a few weeks ago into the description of this video, and I would recommend checking that out. Just before we move on, because it relates to something we're going to show you, when you've built a view that you like looking at here in the chart tool, you can create a template. So when I change to Meta, for example, it's going to default back to that 50-day moving average template that I have there. But if I want to see something on a more fundamental basis, like for repurchase history, for example, this is going to break down Meta's repurchases of common stock, the number of shares outstanding and how that's changed, and a percentage basis here on the bottom. And now every time that I flick through different securities, it's going to keep that template and give me the same view. But I can also build different views, like here's cash conversion cycle, for example, and how that's broken down between these 3 elements. Anything that you can think of and you want to chart it, you can save it as a template and you can use it in the dashboards, which we're just about to show you. So market dashboards are the default ones that we give you. We cover some high-level macro themes like world equity indices, US sectors. We've got factor analysis here as well, global economic data. We've got commodities, corporate credit spreads, fixed income factors, yield curves. We give you a really great glance at the market. And if you do want to edit any of these, you have the power to change the checkboxes here on the left-hand side. And if you want to pull these into the charting tool like this, it will take you to a chart with that already set up and you can play around with it as you want. If you want to create your own views, we have the My Dashboard section. And how that works is you would create a brand new view. We'll go with a blank dashboard here. And we give you a bunch of components. And usually the first thing you want to add in here is a watch list, because that's could be where you're going to pick your securities from. You might want a news feed for those securities, and then you might want a chart as well. We give you intraday performance and historical graph, as well as scatter plot. Just for this example, I'm going to show you the historical price. So we'll go ahead and click PayPal here. We'll give you a default price template, which is pretty nice. You can also change that to a performance template if you want. But if you've taken the time to build templates in Koyfin in the charting tool, you can now populate those in your dashboard as well. So remember that repurchase history one that I showed you. We'll go ahead and build that view for PayPal. I can then decrease the size of this chart in the dashboard. I can add other templates in here as well and build something that looks maybe like this. We're going to run through a few examples. So here is an ETF view. Watch this is full of ETFs. Down here, we've got some AUM data, some cumulative flows, and we've got the premium or discount to NAV. I'm going to go ahead and flick through these, and it's going to change that same view for different securities that I'm looking at. Here's another example, slightly more portfolio centric. So here's a basket of companies you might have. Here's an EPS view and how that's changed over time. Here's a PE versus the average, high, low, and mean. Here's the revenue growth and the gross profit growth over time. Here's that repurchase template that I created, and here's that cash conversion cycle. This is another similar view, but with more of a focus on forward valuation multiples, forward estimates for revenue, margin breakdown, and some growth rates and balance sheet items. Here's a simplified dashboard that just has a basket of stocks, a news feed, and then a year-to-date performance chart. And every time that I flick through these, it's going to add different securities to the chart. Here's a similar view, but with more of a focus on news. I've got a watch list, a scatter plot, a big news feed down here in the middle, and I've got an intraday and a year-to-date performance chart here that will change every time I focus on a different security. It doesn't always have to be portfolio related or fundamental related. If you remember earlier, I showed you that watch list that was for headline inflation. All I've done here is pulled in that watch list here, and on the right-hand side, I have a performance chart that's going to show me the headline inflation rates of companies when I add them to the checklist. And down here, I have all those other ones that I can choose from as well. If you are technically inclined, which I'm certainly not, you can build a view that has a technical parameters with stochastic and RSI and whatever you want in the chart tool, save that as a template, and you can have that view every time that you flick through your securities. And lastly, you can build views that are slightly more niche in fashion. So up here in the chart, we have the US credit card default rate, which has spiked recently. And down here, we have the year-over-year change. It has spiked, but it's not crazy relative to the GFC era. And here on the right-hand side as well, we have the US initial claims data with the continuing claims and the 4-week average as well. So the two last things I want to show you are advanced search and model portfolios. So advanced search is great for people that love searching through the entire library of Koyfin datasets and transcripts. The transcript advanced search will allow you to type in specific key terms like ChatGPT, for example. And if I hit enter, it's going to give me all the earnings calls that have mentioned that word. I can jump straight to them and read them. I can also filter this out by date ranges. I can change the event type. So I might just want to focus on earnings calls, for example, or company conferences. I can change the sector or add specific companies in there as well. And I can also change the way that the search is structured. On the left-hand side here as well, we have security search. So if you're not sure what the ticker is or the nomenclature of a specific data set that you're looking for in Koyfin is, you can use this tool to find it. So if I'm interested in core inflation, for example, in Mexico, I can type that in here. I can focus just on the economic asset category, and I can go to Mexico, and we're going to give you all of the outputs that have either core or inflation in them. So you can see here that we have 6 different data series, and if the one that you're looking for is in here, that's great. If not, reach out to the help desk and we'll see if we can include it. And lastly, we have the model portfolio feature. So this is our newest big feature, and it was launched about 2 weeks ago, specifically for FAs, financial advisors. What it allows you to do is perform a critical function for this user group. We'll jump into one just to give an example. So this one is called Top 10 Market Cap, S&P. And at the inception stage, we're going to allow you to give it a name, a currency, some advisor fee data, an inception date, rebalancing periods you can toggle, and a benchmark. And then in here, you can add the target allocations and weightings. You can add custom rebalance dates and add all of your securities. And when you've created a model that you're interested in studying, we'll spit out this. And here we give you the summary tab, which breaks down the current weight versus target weights, as well as some performance data. The performance chart will allow you to chart the performance of that model over time. You can also change that to a rolling annual return as well with some certain parameters here. The historical returns breaks it out both on a quarterly and an annual basis for the portfolio, the benchmark, and then on a net basis. And the risk metrics, which is my favorite one, gives you some granular information on stress test analysis, drawdown periods and recoveries. It gives you a nice chart here as well. And we break down the quantitative side of things with beta, Sharpe ratios, upside capture, and annualized returns. Model portfolios is a really powerful tool that we were so excited to put in the hands of users because it's going to act as the base for future feature sets that we release in the coming years. Just before we leave, I want to go over the settings quickly. So up here on the right-hand side, you can access your settings. The most important one, of course, is choosing your color theme. You get a nice deep ocean here, or you can resort to the old Koyfin. I typically have it on default. You can change the color selections of up and down indicators all across the platform. Default is green and red, but you can change them to show whatever you want. Preferences allows you to change whether you want live blinking background effects. It allows you to choose whether you open things into a new tab or in the same page. And most importantly, it allows you to change your default graph template. So you see whenever I was flicking between graphs, it changed back to the 50-day moving average. That's the one that I like to see when I focus on a chart. And if you have a custom template, you can add that in there. My data is going to give you the summary of all the different templates you've created across the charting tool, the FA templates tool, and the watch list, as well as watch lists that users have shared with you that you can collaborate in and share with other people as well. And lastly, the referrals page. Whenever you share your referral link with a friend and they join Koyfin, you each get $20 in credits, and your friend gets a 10% discount, and your credits will be stored here. So I hope that's been useful as a high-level summary of all the things that you can do inside of Koyfin. I know that we went quite wide and we didn't go too deep. I just want to remind everyone that if you do want to see specific videos on different feature sets within Koyfin, check out the Koyfin library where we actually break down each of those feature sets in a more granular fashion. Otherwise, thank you for listening, and I hope you got something out of this today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments below this video. You can also reach out to us on Twitter at Koyfin Charts, or you can email our help desk. Thank you.